in exactly 70 days. Your heart will be placed on a golden scale and weighed against a single feather. If your heart is too heavy, a creature with the jaws of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus will devour it, and you will experience something worse than death. You will experience unexistence, total erasure from every timeline, every memory, every moment you ever lived. The ancient Egyptians called this the second death, and they spent 3,000 years, the longest-running civilization in human history, teaching their children how to avoid it. Tonight, you're going to discover that the Egyptian afterlife wasn't heaven or hell. It was the world's most sophisticated quality control system. A 12-hour journey through a cosmic bureaucracy where knowing the right password at the right gate meant the difference between eternal paradise and complete annihilation. Your soul would be disassembled into 6 separate components. Your brain would be thrown away because consciousness lived in your heart. You would need a guidebook, proper documentation, and the ability to recite a 42-point moral checklist of beings who had been evaluating souls for millennia and were not impressed by excuses. But here's what will haunt you long after this story ends. It worked. The Egyptians didn't just believe in life after death. They engineered it. They turned mortality into a test you could study for, immortality into a qualification you could earn, and divine judgment into a system so fair, so comprehensive, so brutally honest that it created a civilization where people spent their entire lives preparing for a performance review they could only take once. You're about to witness the only afterlife in human history that required a resume, multiple forms of ID, and the willingness to have every choice you ever made itemized and evaluated by gods who had seen every variation of human behavior and knew exactly what your heart weighed before it ever touched the scales. You are dead, and you're about to discover that everything you thought you knew about death was incomplete. Your heart has stopped, your lungs have ceased their rhythm, and your consciousness has begun the process of separating into its component parts. Because the Egyptians understood something that most cultures miss. You are not a single, unified being, but a composite of different types of awareness, each with its own function and destination. The first thing that happens is so subtle that most newly dead souls don't even notice it. Your car, the vital essence that distinguishes living from dead, the spark that animated your physical form throughout your lifetime, begins to detach from your body. This is not a gradual fading, but a sudden disconnection, like a plug being pulled from a socket, and the moment it occurs is the exact moment when you stop being alive and start being something else entirely. But the car doesn't disappear or travel to some distant realm. It remains near your physical body, requiring sustenance in the form of food offerings that your living relatives will bring to your tomb. This is not symbolic or metaphorical, but a practical necessity, because even in death your car needs nourishment to maintain its existence. And without it, you will experience a second kind of hunger that is far worse than anything you felt during life. Simultaneously, your bar begins its separation, and this is where you first gain awareness that death is not an ending, but a transformation into a more complex state of being. The bar appears as a bird with a human head, your head, and possesses the remarkable ability to move freely between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Through the bib, you can return to visit your tomb, observe your living relatives, witness the passage of seasons and years, but you cannot interact with the physical world in ways that the living would recognize. Your ib, your heart, remains in your body throughout the mummification process because it contains something far too valuable to discard the complete record of every thought, every emotion, every choice you made during your lifetime. The heart is not just an organ, but a living archive, and it will serve as the primary evidence in your upcoming evaluation. Everything you are and everything you've done is encoded in this fist-sized piece of flesh that spent decades pumping blood through your veins and is now your only testimony to a life well or poorly lived. Your Ren, your name, becomes critically important in death in ways it never was during life. In the Egyptian understanding, knowing someone's true name grants power over them, which is why the gods have secret names they guard carefully, and why learning these names is essential for navigating the afterlife. Your name will be inscribed on your tomb, your funerary goods, your mummy wrappings, because as long as your name is spoken and remembered, a part of you continues to exist even if everything else fails. The Shuyet, your shadow, separates from your body and takes on an independent existence. This is perhaps the strangest of all the soul components, because it suggests that even the darkness you cast during life has its own consciousness, its own purpose in the cosmic order. The shadow can move and act independently, serving as a kind of guardian or witness to your other parts as they navigate their separate journeys. Finally, there is the Sekhem, your power or life force, which represents your ability to affect the world through action and will, in death. This power doesn't vanish, but transforms into a different kind of energy that can be called upon during the trials ahead, assuming you pass the evaluations that determine whether you deserve to maintain any power at all. But all of these separations are temporary, preparations for the ultimate goal to reassemble these scattered components into an arc, a glorified spirit, a perfected version of yourself that can exist eternally in the field of reeds if you successfully navigate the bureaucratic maze that lies ahead. The arc is what you're working toward, but achieving it requires passing through a system so complex that the Egyptians spent centuries developing guidebooks to help souls navigate it. As your consciousness adjusts to this new multi-part existence, you become aware that you're not alone in the darkness. A boat is approaching, a magnificent vessel that glows with an inner light that has nothing to do with fire or sun but seems to emanate from the wood itself. This is the Mesektet, the night bark of Ra, the sun god who must journey through the underworld every night to be reborn each morning. And you are about to join him on the most important commute in the cosmos. The moment you step aboard the Mesektet, you understand that this journey is not optional or metaphorical, but as real and necessary as breathing was during life. Ra himself sits in the centre of the boat, but he is not the triumphant solar deity you saw during the day. In his night form, he's aged and diminished, exhausted from his daily journey across the sky, and now he must traverse an even more dangerous route through the 12 hours of the Duat, the underworld that exists beneath and within the earth, a place that is simultaneously physical geography and spiritual landscape. The boat is crowded with other deities, each with a specific function in this nightly odyssey. There is Sia, the god of perception, whose job is to stand at the prow and identify dangers before they can threaten the bark. There is H, the god of authoritative utterances, who speaks the words of power that compel hostile forces to retreat. There is Heka, the god of magic itself, who maintains the protective spells that keep the boat intact as it passes through regions where normal matter and energy behave according to rules that would terrify physicists. The first hour of the journey through Duat begins the moment the sun sets in the west, and you find yourself in a landscape that resembles the Nile Valley, but with subtle wrongness in every detail. The river you're travelling on flows in the opposite direction from rivers in the living world. The sky overhead has stars that move in patterns that violate celestial mechanics, and the shores are populated by beings who appear human at a distance, but reveal themselves to be something else entirely as the boat draws nearer. These are the inhabitants of Duat souls who have completed their evaluations and been assigned to various roles in the underworld bureaucracy. Some serve as guides for newly arrived dead, others maintain the infrastructure of the afterlife, and still others work as guards and gatekeepers for the regions ahead. They watch the boat pass with expressions that mix sympathy, curiosity, and something that might be contempt, because they remember their own first journey through these regions and know the trials that await you. As the boat progresses into the second hour, the landscape becomes more obviously supernatural. The river narrows and the shores close in, creating a passage barely wide enough for the bark to navigate. This is intentional design, a choke point where hostile forces can be more easily controlled, and you see why the precaution is necessary. The waters around the boat begin to churn with movement as serpents, some as large as the boat itself, surface and attempt to capsize the vessel. But these are not random attacks. Every challenge in Duat serves a purpose in the cosmic order, and these serpents are testing the strength of Ra's magic, probing for weaknesses that might have developed during his daylight journey. The defensive spells hold, the serpents retreat, and the boat continues, but the encounter serves as a warning that nothing in this realm can be taken for granted. that every moment requires vigilance and proper protection. The third hour brings you to the first gate, and this is where your journey transforms from passive observation to active participation. The gate is not a simple door, but a massive structure of stone and bronze, inscribed with hieroglyphs that seem to shift and change as you watch them. Before it stand guardian deity whose appearance is so disturbing that newly dead souls often try to flee at the sight, a figure with the body of a human, the head of a crocodile, and eyes that reflect not light but an absence deeper than darkness. The guardian speaks, and its voice comes not from its mouth, but from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. I am swallower of sinners, guardian of the third gate. Speak your name, declare your nature, recite your credentials, or be consumed, or this is not a threat but a statement of function. The Guardian is quality control, a filter designed to catch souls who lack the proper preparation for what lies ahead, and it has no interest in explanations or excuses. This is the moment when you understand why the Book of the Dead exists, why your relatives paid significant money to commission a personalized copy and placed it in your tomb. The book is not religious poetry or philosophical speculation, but a technical manual, a collection of passwords and protocols that allow properly prepared souls to navigate encounters like this. You open your scroll, metaphorically, since your hands no longer interact with physical objects the way they did during life, and read the required passage. I am known by my name in the house of my father. I have been purified at the eastern gate. I have made offerings according to the proper forms. My heart has been judged and found light. I am worthy to pass your threshold, swallower of sinners, whose secret name is Acheru, and I claim my right to continue this journey. The use of the Guardian's secret name, which very few souls possess, changes everything. The terrifying figure steps aside, the gate swings open, and you pass through into the fourth hour of the journey. But you notice something as the gate closes behind you. Several other souls, newly dead like yourself, approached the gate without the proper documentation. They tried to argue their case, to explain that they were good people who deserved passage, but the Guardian showed no interest in their protests. One by one, they were seized and dragged into the darkness beyond the shore, their screams fading as they were delivered to a fate you don't want to contemplate. This is justice, indubit impartial, absolute, and utterly unconcerned with intentions or regrets. The fourth and fifth hours pass with increasing strangeness, as the geography of Duat becomes less recognizable and more obviously symbolic. You traverse caverns where the walls are covered in constantly changing murals depicting every possible human action, good and evil. Trivial and momentous, you pass through regions where the air itself has weight and texture, where breathing becomes an act of will rather than automatic reflex. You witness temples dedicated to gods you've never heard of, minor deities with hyper-specific responsibilities like guardian of the fourth step of the fifth temple, or she who remembers the dreams of cats. But all of this is preparation for the sixth hour, the deepest point of the night, the moment of ultimate transformation. The boat enters a vast cavern whose ceiling is lost in darkness above, and at its centre is a sight that stops every soul aboard a massive sarcophagus, golden and covered in inscriptions, radiating a power that makes your bar shiver even in its bird form. This is the mummy of Osiris, the god who was murdered by his brother Set, dismembered, and scattered across Egypt before being reassembled by his wife Isis. Osiris cannot return to the world of the living, but he serves a more important function. He's the template for all resurrection, the proof that death is not final, the mechanism by which the cycle of renewal operates. Ra's boat draws alongside the sarcophagus, and the sun god rises from his seat. What happens next unfolds in stages that violate every principle of linear time and unified identity. First, Ra's age form begins to dissolve, not like something melting, but like something remembering that it was never solid to begin with. His flesh becomes translucent, then transparent, then simply absent, revealing a core of pure solar fire that has been burning since the moment creation began. Simultaneously, the lid of Osiris's sarcophagus slides open without physical contact, moved by forces that have nothing to do with leverage or strength. The mummy inside begins to glow with a green luminescence. the colour of new growth pushing through dark soil, the colour of life asserting itself against the finality of death. This is not resurrection in any conventional sense, but something far stranger. Two divine consciousnesses that should not be able to occupy the same space beginning to overlap, to interpenetrate, to exchange their fundamental natures. You watch as Ra's solar fire flows into Osiris's mummy like liquid light pouring into a vessel, but the vessel is also pouring its contents back into the source, creating a circuit of energy that should be impossible but is happening nonetheless. Ra is dying completely, experiencing the total extinction of his solar identity, while Osiris is awakening from his eternal death sleep. And both transformations are occurring in the same instant, in the same location, using the same matter and energy. The air in the cavern becomes thick with potential, as if reality itself is holding its breath. You feel your own soul components beginning to resonate with the merger, your Ka and Ba Nib all vibrating in sympathy with the cosmic event unfolding before you. This is why you are here. Why all souls must witness this moment, because every individual resurrection, every personal transformation from death to eternal life gear follows this exact pattern. Ra and Osiris are not just renewing themselves, they are demonstrating the template, showing you the process you must undergo to achieve the Ak state. The merger reaches its climax as the two deities become completely indistinguishable, a single being that is simultaneously the sun and the underworld, life and death, movement and stillness. For a moment that seems to last for hours, you see the fundamental paradox of Egyptian theology made visible, that renewal requires destruction, that rebirth necessitates death, that the sun god must descend into absolute darkness to emerge again in the east. Then the separation begins, but it is not a reversal of the merger. What emerges from the sarcophagus is Ra transformed, no longer the exhausted deity who entered the 6th hour, but a being of such concentrated vitality that looking at him directly causes your Ba to fold its wings and avert its gaze. The aged form is gone, replaced by something that appears young not because it is new, but because it has shed everything old and retained only the essential fire. This is the Re who will rise tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for eternity, each time completing this same journey, each time experiencing this same death and rebirth. The boat continues its journey, but now it moves with renewed purpose, racing toward the eastern horizon where dawn waits to be born. The 7th through 11th hours are a blur of increasing urgency as Ra's bark fights its way through the final regions of Duat. The greatest threat appears in the 7th hour, Apep, the serpent of chaos, who has been waiting in the darkness for this exact moment. Apep is not like the smaller serpents from earlier hours. This is a creature whose body stretches for miles, whose scales are made from crystallized disorder, whose very existence threatens the fundamental structure of reality. The battle between Ra's defenders and Apep is not simple combat, but a war between order and chaos fought on multiple levels simultaneously. The gods aboard the bark recite spells that reinforce the boundaries between existence and non-existence. They hurl weapons that are actually solidified concepts like justice and harmony, projectiles that damage chaos by imposing structure upon it. Apep fights back with weapons of entropy and dissolution, trying to tear holes in the fabric of the boat that will allow chaos to pour through and overwhelm everything. You watch this cosmic struggle with growing horror, realizing that your resurrection depends on the outcome. If Apep succeeds in stopping Ra's journey, there will be no dawn, no field of reeds, no eternal life for anyone. The entire project of Egyptian civilization, 3,000 years of preparing the dead for immortality, will have been rendered pointless by the victory of chaos over order, but the defences hold. Apep is driven back, not destroyed, but forced to retreat to the depths where he will wait for tomorrow night's battle. The pattern repeats every single night for eternity. Order must continuously defend itself against chaos, and this eternal struggle is what gives meaning to the moral choices you made during life. Every act of justice, every moment of truth, every time you maintained Ma'at instead of contributing to Isfia, you were strengthening the forces that keep Apep at bay. The 12th hour arrives as the sky begins to lighten, and the boat approaches a final gate. This one leading not deeper into Duat, But out toward the world of the living, Ra transforms one last time, shedding his aged human form entirely and becoming Khepri, a scarab beetle who rolls the sun back into the sky each morning. You watch in awe as the solar disk rises over the eastern horizon, proof that the journey succeeded. That order has prevailed over chaos for another day. But your journey is not complete. While Ra returns to the sky to begin his daily passage, you're directed toward a different destination, a palace within Duat where the most important evaluation of your existence will take place. This is the Hall of Two Truths, and entering it is like walking into the world's most serious courtroom, combined with the most advanced laboratory ever designed for measuring the worth of consciousness. The hall is vast beyond comprehension, its ceiling supported by pillars carved to resemble the papyrus columns that grow along the Nile. But each pillar is inscribed with the names of everyone who's ever been judged here, a record stretching back to the beginning of civilization. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a throne that seems to be carved from a single massive gemstone, sits Osiris in his role as Judge of the Dead. Osiris is attended by 42 assessor gods, each responsible for evaluating a different aspect of moral behaviour. They are arranged in 2 rows flanking the central aisle, and you must walk between them while each deity examines you for the specific transgression they oversee. Their scrutiny is not gentle or forgiving. These beings have evaluated billions of souls over thousands of years, and they have developed the ability to perceive guilt and innocence with absolute precision. Before you reach the throne, you must perform the negative confession, a ritual that requires you to declare your innocence of 42 specific offences while standing before the deity who judges that particular sin. This is not a vague claim of general goodness, but a detailed inventory of your moral behaviour, and each statement must be true because the gods can detect lies with the same certainty that living humans can detect the difference between light and darkness. "I have not killed," you declare to the first assessor, whose eyes bore into you with an intensity that makes your bar flicker and dim. The god examines the claim, reviewing the entire record of your life in an instant, and finding it true, nods permission for you to continue. "I have not stolen," you say to the second assessor, and again your claim is verified. "I have not caused suffering," you tell the third, and here you feel a moment of uncertainty, because no one lives a life without causing some pain to others. But the assessment is about intention and pattern, rather than individual incidents, and you pass this evaluation as well. The 42 confessions continue, covering offences ranging from obvious crimes like murder and theft to more subtle transgressions like gossiping, losing your temper, or being sexually inappropriate. Each confession is a test not just of your actions but of your self-awareness, your ability to honestly assess your own character, and acknowledge both your virtues and your failures. When the final confession is complete, you approach the throne of Osiris, and here you encounter the mechanism that determines your ultimate fate. In the centre of the hall stands a massive balance scale, not decorative but functional, enchanted to measure spiritual weight with perfect accuracy. Anubis, the jackal-headed god who presides over mummification and guides souls through the afterlife, stands beside the scale, ready to perform his most important duty. Your heart, the ib that contains the complete record of your life, appears on one pan of the scale. On the other pan sits a single white feather, so light that you wonder how any heart could possibly balance against it. But this is not an ordinary feather. It is the feather of Maat, the goddess who embodies truth, justice, and cosmic order, and it represents the weight that a perfectly righteous soul should have. The crowd of witnesses in the hall falls silent as Anubis adjusts the scale and steps back to observe the result. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, stands ready with his palette and brushes to record the judgment for the permanent archives of the universe. And crouched beneath the scale, barely visible in the shadows, is Amit, a creature so disturbing that even the gods avert their eyes from her. Amit is not a deity to be worshipped, but a function to be feared. Her body is a combination of the 3 most dangerous animals that inhabit the Nile, the head of a crocodile, the front quarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She exists for one purpose only: to devour the hearts of those who fail this final test, consigning them to the second death. A total annihilation of consciousness that is far worse than any torture or punishment imaginable. The scale begins to move, and your entire existence hangs in the balance as the two pans rise and fall, seeking equilibrium. If your heart is heavier than the feather, weighed down by sins and selfishness, by cruelty and lies, by a life lived in service of Isfet rather than Ma'at, then Amit will consume your heart and you will cease to exist in any form whatsoever. There will be no punishment, no suffering, just deletion from the universe as if you had never been born. But if your heart is light, if you lived with integrity and kindness, if you maintained balance and truth, if you contributed to cosmic order rather than chaos, then the scale will balance perfectly, and Osiris will speak the words that transform your status from candidate to accepted. You are justified, speaker of truth, and you are granted passage to the field of reeds for all eternity. The scale steadies, the two pans level, perfectly balanced. Your heart is light, not because you were perfect during life, but because the weight of your good deeds and honest efforts outweighs your failures and mistakes. Amit sinks back into the shadow, disappointed but patient, knowing that other souls will fail where you succeeded. Thoth makes his notation in the eternal records. Osiris rises from his throne and gestures toward a doorway that has appeared in the far wall of the hall, an opening that leads to the destination you have been working towards since the moment of your death. You pass through the doorway and find yourself in a landscape so familiar and so perfect that you weep with joy, despite no longer having tear ducts. This is the field of reeds, the Seket Aru, the eternal paradise that is the reward for a life well lived and a death properly prepared for. It's not a realm of clouds and harps, but a perfected version of the Nile Valley, with crops that grow eternally ripe, with waters that never flood or fail, with sunlight that never becomes oppressive heat. Here you are reunited with the components of your soul that separated at death. Your car finds the food offerings that sustain it. Your bar is free to fly wherever it wishes. Your name is spoken by those who remember you. And all of these elements merge into the Ag, the glorified spirit that represents your final transformation. You're no longer a candidate or an applicant or a soul under evaluation. You are a successful graduate of the most rigorous quality control system ever designed, and you have earned your place in eternity through preparation, proper documentation, and a life lived in accordance with Ma'at. The Egyptians who created this system understood something that most cultures miss. Immortality should not be a gift distributed randomly or awarded based on belief rather than behavior. They built a civilization around the principle that eternal life must be earned through specific actions, moral choices, and proper preparation. The complexity of their afterlife bureaucracy, with its multiple soul components, its guidebooks and passwords, its trials and evaluations, was not arbitrary cruelty, but a sophisticated recognition that consciousness is too valuable to preserve automatically, that only those who demonstrate understanding of cosmic order and contribute to its maintenance deserve to continue existing forever. But the system's true genius reveals itself when you understand how deeply it penetrated every aspect of Egyptian daily life. The 70 days of mummification were not simply preservation procedures, but a deliberate parallel to the 70 days that certain stars disappear. From the night sky before being reborn, your physical body was being aligned with cosmic cycles, synchronized with the same forces governing celestial movements. Every step of the process had meaning the removal of your brain through your nostrils because Egyptians believed consciousness resided in the heart, not the head. The preservation of that heart at all costs because it would testify for or against you. The placement of your internal organs in canopic jars, each protected by one of Horus's 4 sons, ensuring that even your separated parts remained under divine protection during the dangerous journey ahead. The opening of the mouth ceremony, performed on your mummy by priests wearing ritual masks, was not symbolic theatre, but necessary reactivation of your senses for use in the afterlife. The Pezeshkef knife that touched your lips was the same tool used to cut umbilical cords during birth, deliberately connecting death to rebirth. making your resurrection as literal as your original entrance into life. When the priest touched your eyes, your ears, your mouth with sacred implements while reciting the proper spells, they were performing cosmic surgery, reconnecting your separated soul components to your preserved body so that the Ak could eventually form. The Ushabti figures placed in your tomb, those small servant statues inscribed with spells, represented perhaps the most practical magic ever invented. The Egyptians understood that the field of reeds, despite being paradise, would still require agricultural labour to maintain its perfection. Rather than expecting the blessed dead to spend eternity farming, they created magical automatons that would activate when called upon, performing the necessary work so that you could enjoy the fruits of paradise without the labour. This wasn't cheating the system, but working within it, using the same magical principles that governed all of Duat to create a more comfortable eternal existence. The lake of fire that appears in both the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead exemplifies the dual nature of everything in Duat. For souls weighed and found worthy, the lake served as a source of renewal, its flames purifying rather than destroying, cleansing away the last residues of mortal imperfection. But for those declared unworthy, the same flames became instruments of the second death, total annihilation that left nothing behind, not even memory. The same location, the same fire, performing opposite functions depending on the soul's quality. A perfect representation of how Egyptian justice operated on principles of cosmic efficiency rather than human emotion. The evolution of these beliefs over 3 millennia demonstrates remarkable consistency of core principles despite changing details. During the Old Kingdom, when pharaohs were considered living gods, the pyramid texts promised them direct ascension to the stars, transformation into celestial bodies that would shine forever alongside Ra. But even then, the underlying principle remained the king must know the correct spells, must speak the proper names, must demonstrate worthiness through knowledge and preparation. Divine ancestry alone was insufficient without proper documentation and ritual performance. By the Middle Kingdom, as power decentralized and a merchant class emerged with wealth but not royal blood, the coffin texts democratized access to the afterlife while maintaining its standards. The innovation wasn't making immortality easier, but making the preparation tools available to more people. If you could afford a properly inscribed coffin and the services of a competent embalmer, you could attempt the same journey the pharaohs took. The gods didn't lower their standards. Egyptian society raised its access to the knowledge required to meet those standards. The New Kingdom's Book of the Dead represented the final evolution, mass production of personalized afterlife guidebooks. Scribes maintained libraries of spells that could be customized for individual clients, selecting the specific incantations most relevant to each person's life circumstances and social status. A farmer's Book of the Dead emphasized different challenges than a priest's or a soldier's, acknowledging that different lives required different preparations while all souls faced the same fundamental judgment. Your journey through Duat has revealed that the Egyptian underworld was never about punishment or reward in the simplistic sense. It was about evaluation, about determining which consciousnesses had developed the qualities necessary for eternal existence, and which had failed to meet the standards required. The gods who judged you were not tyrants or sadists, but quality control specialists, administrators of a cosmic system that had been refined over millennia to ensure that only the best examples of consciousness achieved immortality. The 42 negative confessions you recited weren't arbitrary rules, but a comprehensive ethical framework that addressed everything from major crimes to minor social transgressions. I have not killed sat alongside I have not been loud-voiced, because the Egyptians understood that maintaining Ma'at required attention to both dramatic actions and everyday behaviour. A murderer obviously disrupted cosmic order, but so did someone who constantly disturbed the peace with unnecessary noise. Both contributed to Isfet, to chaos, and both diminished their chances of passing judgment. The assessment gods arranged in 2 rows through the Hall of Two Truths, each specialised in detecting specific failures of character. The god who judged theft had spent millennia learning every rationalisation thieves used to justify their actions. The god who judged sexual misconduct understood every excuse, every justification, every attempt to reframe selfish desire as something more noble. You could not lie to beings who had heard every variation of human dishonesty thousands of times before. Your only option was to have actually lived according to Ma'at, to have made the hard choices during life that would allow you to speak truth during death. The democratic evolution of afterlife access, from royal privilege to middle-class opportunity to commercialized guidebooks, shows how the Egyptians continually refined their system to make it more just and more accessible, while maintaining its essential rigor. The Book of the Dead was not sold to make money, but to ensure that anyone willing to repair properly had the tools necessary for success. The Ushabti servants buried in tombs were not status symbols, but practical solutions to the problem of mandatory labour in the afterlife. Every element of Egyptian death culture served a specific function in the larger project of preparing souls for evaluation and creating conditions for successful resurrection. This system created a civilization where death was not feared but prepared for with the same diligence one might apply to any important project. Egyptian children grew up learning the names of the gate guardians, memorizing the negative confessions, understanding that every choice they made was creating the record that would ultimately determine their eternal fate. This wasn't morbid obsession, but practical wisdom if consciousness continues after death. And if that continuation depends on proper preparation, then spending your life preparing is the most rational possible use of time. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep in a world that has mostly forgotten how to think seriously about death, remember that, for 3,000 years, the longest-lived civilization in human history organized itself around the principle that dying is the most important thing you will ever do. Their preparation for death gives meaning to life, and that immortality is not a right but a qualification that must be earned through consistent effort, proper documentation, and the willingness to subject yourself to the most comprehensive performance review ever designed. Sleep well, and dream of a time when death was not the end of consciousness but its ultimate examination, when the gods operated the most sophisticated bureaucracy ever imagined, and when eternal life was achieved not through faith or grace, but through the patient work of becoming a soul worthy of preserving forever